Charles, Professor of Media, Cities, and Solutions at Temple University.
Then we'll hear from Phil Agnew, who co-founded the Dream Defenders in 2012 after the murder of Trayvon Martin, and has been dubbed one of our generation's leading voices. He has been an organizer since his days as a student activist at Florida A&M University, and Agnew is an organizer, artist, educator, and advocate.
And next we'll hear from Professor Bernadette Atuunde, the Detroit professor. She is a law professor, empirical researcher, and activist. She attended UCLA, Yale Law School, the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Her work deals with land and housing stolen from the people of African diaspora. Wow.
You got it.
Communications person. I can, but I just want to say for the professor, I just seeing firsthand her work to really speak out against the unconstitutional foreclosures that are happening in Detroit and Wayne County, and actually return homes back to folks, especially Black folks who have had their homes stolen. So I really appreciate all of your work, Professor. Thank you.
We'll also hear from Lauren Hood, who's also a lifelong Detroiter. Lauren is the new director of programs for New Detroit, a coalition to achieve racial equity. She's also an equitable development strategist and founder of Supernatural, a new platform for urban inspiration and activation.
And then we'll hear from Arthur Bowman the third, who is my friend, my comrade, who is we're in the same political home with BYP 100 in the Detroit chapter. And he also is the current lead on the Community Mutual Aid program. In his professional life, Arthur is a graduate researcher in the field of solid state physics at Wayne State University, Department of Physics and Astronomy in Detroit.
So then we'll also hear from one of my other favorite Detroiters, Ms. Davita Davison. She is the executive director of Food Lab Detroit. Food Lab Detroit is a mission-based organization that helps to build a more equitable, nourishing, and sustainable food system right here in the city of Detroit, cultivating new leaders for food systems in Detroit. So I'm really excited to have her too.
And last but not least, who I will turn it over next to, who will be our moderator for this event and the person who brought us together for this evening, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, Congresswoman for the 13th Congressional District, which includes Detroit and several Wayne County communities. It's an honor for me to be able to work for her on behalf of the residents of the 13th Congressional District. She always brings the residents into the room, fighting for us day in and day out. And it's a complete honor. So I'll turn it over to you, Congresswoman.
No, thank you so much, Denzel, Larissa. Thank you all so much for being part of this and for my team. We came together kind of around this vision, and they came together and said, like, what would be the dream kind of team of people to put together? And all of your names came up. So I really appreciate all of our panelists and those on participating. I do want you all to know, I was born and raised in Detroit, and I always call it the most beautiful, blackest city in the country. And there's a huge amount of strength here, resilience, but there's also people that are just tired. And one of the things that I realize over and over again, and I've told you before we kind of started, is, and for everybody to know, I constantly hear people talking about the impact of our Black neighbors during this pandemic and during this crisis, but I don't see them in mainstream media talking about it. They don't have, all of you advocates, the people on the ground, those that are really connected to what it means to do nothing, what it means to, have inequity in testing, access to healthcare, all of the things that really are important, in poverty, in racial injustice, environmental racism. And all of your voices are so missing as we talk about this pandemic around the nation. And I want my residents and I want people to hear from you all and understand that there are people fighting for them, for every single person in this country. I think, when I think of transformative change, I don't think about it happening in Congress or happening because some media decided it was relevant. It only happens when we organize and fight back. And I think about Flint, how long it took. People were out here organizing around little babies and children getting infested with lead infested water. And it took people organizing, rising to be created, and all the movement folks demanding it. And then finally media picked it up, right? Finally people started paying attention, but they're still fighting. They still don't have access to water. So a lot of the brokenness, a lot of the economic divide, structural racism, the systems that are in place that has been oppressing our Black neighbors for so long existed prior to the pandemic. Now it's so evident in the numbers. And I know Ayanna knows I say this all the time and try to bring this into the room every single time that folks talk about how do we, they call it hot spots. And sometimes I'm always taken aback because I'm like, you mean the African-American communities? I want them to say it. Sometimes I feel like it's dismissive when they say hot spots. And I always remind them that 40% of Michiganders, people in Michigan that have died from COVID, are African-Americans, even though African-Americans make less than 15% of the total population. But you all have been in this fight prior to this pandemic. You've been talking about poverty, talking about lack of access to water, inequity and access to healthy foods, all of those things. And so it is so critically important that we are raising our voices, organizing and out-organizing those that keep kind of dismissing, or I call it the politics of waiting. They're constantly wanting to study us. They're constantly wanting to do reports, create task force. But I'm like, we've been studied enough. We're tired. What are we waiting for? Our babies are dying. So I just want you all to know, like, your voice matters. In any way I can try to uplift the work that you all are doing, I want to do that. And that's why here we're trying to focus and center around organizations in my district that are fighting back. I have one organization, Brightmore Food Pantry, who is out there paying for plumbers to go out and fix people's plumbing so they can get access to water. I have, Operation Refuge that is literally lines out the door to get food to people's table, because right now, even if you get unemployment, you get kicked off of food assistance. There's just so much brokenness in the system that is keeping people oppressed, and it's so painful. It's so important, again, to have BYP 100 Detroit action on the streets, engaging people, especially our young folks that feel very much the trauma they've been experiencing in childhood, and now that they need to channel that towards the transformative change that we need. So again, thank you all so much for being here. I want to talk less and hear from you all. And again, I know when I see somebody that reflects my values on TV or finally I'm like, oh my God, finally somebody's speaking truth and somebody's bringing that into the room. Because I hate that people keep saying we got to go back to normal. It just irks me because it wasn't normal before, y'all. It wasn't. And Sonia Renee Taylor's like, this is our time to create a new garment. And I hope that with your work, we're doing that. If anything, all the pain that we've been seeing, it's been really painful for me. Everybody knows in my team, it's hard for me to see so many of our neighbors getting impacted by this and them feeling like nobody gives a shit. And I want them to know people do, and they are out here fighting for them. And so I really appreciate you and love you all for doing this. It really means so much to me. Thank you. And I think, I'm sorry, I'm never doing this right. I never do this stuff right, especially when I get more. So I want to start with my sister in service, Ayanna Presley, who says, the first thing I ever heard her say was people closest to the pain need to be closest to the power. And she is also a person that fought so hard. I don't know if you all know, we had a historic hearing under the leadership of our late chairman, Elijah Cummings, on trauma and House Oversight Committee. So it matters when we elect people like Ayanna. And for us to have that hearing to talk about all the different kinds of lack of the way the policies work and how it enables trauma and how we're not actually looking at it through that lens. And so I'm really, really grateful for her leadership. And, she's let me cry a few times on her shoulder in some ways. Now we have to do it virtually. But I think it's really profound for me to hear her stories about being with her mother. And I mean, I just tear up and I can see so much strength every time she brings her mother into the room. Like I bring my district, if you ever heard her talk, sometime her mother comes up every single time, no matter what policy she's working on. And so I am just so honored and blessed to be serving with her. And I tell you, Massachusetts 7th is really blessed to have her. And she is somebody that, is much more graceful than me. I channel my anger a little bit different, but I love her. And even if she's going to go say, that's okay. But there's something incredibly beautiful. You can almost hear a pin drop when Ayanna Pressley, speaks before our caucus. And afterwards, you're like, And I just, I hope that, I know for me, it's like, okay, and what are we going to do next? Let's fix it. Where I hope, and I know it's going to happen, that people are going to finally say, okay, we got to do what Ayanna just said we got to do. But she is not shy to continue. So I was just saying, it's so true, because Ayanna, I'm like, oh, Ayanna, they're calling Ayanna to speak. And then when you do speak, honestly, I'm like, yeah, what she said. And then I feel like it's going to change our colleagues to understanding, the language you bring into the room. Even people don't talk like that anymore, Ayanna, in that space. And so it matters that you're there. So thank you so much. And Ayanna Pressley.
Well,
I'm not doing everybody's intro.
Rashida,
I love you.
Well, I'm just, as I've said many times before, I don't believe that any of us are here simply to occupy space. We're also here to create it. And so I want to thank you, Rashida, and your entire team, Larissa, Denzel, Rasha. Thank you for what you're doing every day in district, in community. Thank you for the opportunity to sit at this virtual table with all of you while we are physically distancing in the interest of public health. It's so important that we continue to remain connected, continue to build community, continue to build movements. And I also just want to say, I'm always reminding my sister in service to not be an apologist for showing up exactly as you are in all of your vulnerability and all of your rawness. I think we have to give each other space to acknowledge, not only in this moment, but especially in this moment, that it is okay to not be okay. We are navigating a crisis within a crisis, a public health crisis, an economic crisis, the confluence of both of those and all the trauma that it is wreaking. And it's layered trauma. I was giving a speech the other day and started crying in the middle of it because it was the same day that everything was breaking about Ahmaud Arbery. I had the privilege, the blessing of speaking with his mother yesterday, and there are no words. Sean Reed and Breonna Taylor, we can't keep up with the fire hose of dehumanizing, demoralizing, traumatic things that are happening. And so here we are as Black folks navigating what is not a completely new normal, which is to not see everything and everyone as an imminent threat. It's a layered trauma. It's a new threat. And because of the impacts of structural racism and the comorbidities of that, Black folks have been slowly dying for a long time in community because of ecosystems that don't support our surviving and thriving. And now I would consider it sort of a political carbon monoxide, slowly killing us, a deficit of political will and courage. And now it's just happening more bluntly in a more acute way. And yet still people are operating with callous disregard about Black lives and Black bodies. And so these are challenging times. And that's why it's important that we continue to set a virtual table, come together in community, and acknowledge that although we are resilient, we are not invincible. And that's why we have to lean on and look to one another. And I agree with you, Rashida. Ultimately, the most enduring, sustainable, transformative change will be that with which we build together in community. I believe the best solutions are those that are community driven and that are government endorsed, not the other way around. And that's why I always say the people closest to the pain should be the closest to the power, driving and informing the policy making. I know one of the things I love about Rashida, and I certainly strive to live out as well, is to stay in proximity to the hurt. on purpose, so that you don't allow yourself to become so removed from it that you're ever complacent, but to stay acutely uncomfortable. Because when we do that, we better understand the complexity and the nuance of the problem, but it's also where we find the solutions. That's why Rashida can speak with authority. She has a mandate from the people. She's emboldened because she knows that when she sits at a policy-making table and says, the thing that we need to get to people right away is cash, that is the thing that they need the most, that she is speaking with authority because she has actively listened to the people and now is advocating and working alongside them to make that so. I will just say, because I want to bring Brother Mark and Brother Cornell into this, and what an honor to again sit at this virtual table with them. They are incredible stewards in the public discourse and people that I admire tremendously. But the thing that I've been focused on is ensuring an equitable public health response and economic recovery. And so for me, that has been about data. And you might say, well, why do we need data to confirm what we already know? We knew that Black and Brown communities would be hit hardest by this. But we need the data, not for the sake of collecting data. We need the data to save lives. Due to the criminal negligence of this administration and their science denials and press briefings that function more like disinformation campaigns, we started this pandemic behind. So we need the data to get ahead of it and then to inform where the resources go. And so early on, I was banging the drum about the need to collect racial data in real time, to disaggregate it, to publicly report it, to ensure equitable access to testing and treatment, and so that we could identify where were their trends and then marry that with resources. So Rashida, in the last relief bill, after Secretary of Health and Human Services, Azar, was unresponsive, we created a bill, the Equitable Data Collection Act, which was adopted into the last relief bill with $1 billion so that we can follow where the highest infection rates are. I don't know if a lot of folks know this, but at the beginning of the pandemic, the resources were being marshaled according to population size, not infection rate. And that's an algorithm that we had to change. And so now we'll have that investment in those resources, $1 billion, so that we can do contact tracing, so that we can do mobile testing and antibody testing, so that we can invest in community health centers because they're closest to community. So the data piece has been really key, I think, to give that transparency so that we can recalibrate in real time. And so that's the thing that I've been focused on. Again, the data only devastatingly confirms what we already knew would happen, and it doesn't address, and I'll end here, the other issue is the embedded bias and racism within our healthcare system. And that's not to cast aspersions against and accuse our frontline health workers of being racist. We're talking about structures and systems and culture, a culture of delegitimizing Black pain, which is why Black folks are being sent home to die, because they can show up presenting with all of the symptoms and still not get tested. That's exactly why we have a Black maternal mortality crisis, because we have those embedded biases within our healthcare system, which delegitimize Black pain. So that's why this conversation is so important, so that we recognize and legitimize our pain and create space for it. And then I think in the long run, it is about what we're going to do in community. The fact that the Black dollar only stays in the Black community for 6 hours, we have to do something about that. The fact that, grocery stores determine where to open based on census tracts. That's why we live in food deserts. That's why we are more likely to have the underlying conditions of diabetes and heart disease. So all these things are interconnected. And we can talk more about that later, but that's been my focus, mitigating the trauma and collecting the data to inform where the resources go.
You see, I told you all. Thank you, Ayanna. It's so wonderful. I think it's really powerful. And we did put a link for folks on some of the great work that Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley is doing to gather that data, to recalibrate. With that, I want to get to Dr. Cornell West, who is my brother in the struggle, right? And he has the best hugs ever. Very sisterly and very, I always feel safe being around you because I feel like you so much give me credibility being proud Palestinian that want to free my grandmother from oppression, and you never let me apologize for that. And so I thank you so much, Dr. West, for being here, and would love to hear from you now. And thank you, Ayanam. I know you have to go in a little bit. So.
Yeah, I'm hanging out.
Dr. West?
Can you hear me?
There
all right?
you go.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Well, let me first say that I am here because of my deep love for my dear sister Rashida. That you are such a courageous and a visionary leader in such a grim and bleak time, that I just want to do all that I can to express my support, my solidarity, to make sure you go back in November and go back as many times as you like. You're holding up a bloodstained banner of truth and justice for poor and working people in your 13th district in this nation, on the West Bank in Gaza, but you're also concerned about dollars in India. You're concerned about the Roma people in Europe. You're concerned about Jews in France. Anytime anybody is being hated and dominated, you were there. And that's my kind of human being and my kind of sister. Now, Sister Yana, it was just a year ago we were together. Oh, Lord, you were so eloquent at Harvard.
Black Harvard commencement.
Ooh,
Highlight
Harvard
of my
commencement.
life to share that stage with you, brother.
You set that place on fire and set my soul on fire. And so I salute you and your mother as well. You know, I'll do the same thing in terms of supporting you to make sure you go back. You all got to go back together. You got to go back together to Congress in November.
Yes, sir.
And then, of course, and Brother Phil and Brother Mark Lamont, good God Almighty, we've been together so many times, and it's always a blessing. I'm not going to take a long time. All I really want to say is that, you know, the brothers used to say in the barbershop that every setback is a setup for a comeback. And so we've got to have bounce back in this moment. It's fairly clear that the greed is running amok, the hatred is running amok, the corruption is running amok. You got financialized capitalism with Wall Street in the driver's seat. You got commodified culture with people concerned about just sensationalistic surface stories rather than getting beneath them to the truth. That's why we can't depend on corporate media for the most part. But then we got a militarized nation state that is still dropping drones externally and still reinforcing mass incarceration internally. So the question becomes, how do we unflinchingly, candidly, critically tell the truth about the suffering and misery of precious, poor, and working people, and at the same time, we muster the courage to fight? So we can't just tell that truth, and it's a difficult thing because most people are not hearing the truth. But even in telling that truth, you just can't be a spectator. You got to intervene. You got to be a part of it, as it were. You know, Kwame Ture used to always say, to really be a genuine person who engages in observation, you got to engage in participation, because the participation helps you change and transform the suffering that you're talking about. We're getting a whole lot of representations of certain kinds of disproportionate impact. And Sister Yana, I understand very well about how important it is to get that data precisely, because you want to intervene and participate and transform what's going on. But there's a lot of folks that act like they're so surprised about the disproportionate impact on Black and red and brown people. You say, what are you talking about? Of course, the legacy of white supremacy cuts so deep in this empire, in this country. Anytime there's suffering, there's going to be disproportionate amount of suffering on the brown side, on the red sides, on the Black sides of town. That's true in Detroit. It's true in Wisconsin. It's true in Chicago, across the board. But what we need to do is to do precisely what my dear sister Rashida has always done, which is to say, I'm going to intervene. I'm going to be part of grassroots organizing. I'm going to be part of a coming together in solidarity, in community. And you, both of you all, Sister Ayanna and Sister Rashida, you all do it on the inside. I know how difficult it is. I've never been on the inside, of course, never really want to be, not in the political sense. I don't know how you do it. I'm praying for you every day. But you're working on the inside with tremendous courage and integrity. Those of us on the outside trying to put pressure to bear, I wish we had a major social movement. We don't. But we got social motion. We got social momentum. And we have an outsider-insider strategy trying to come to terms with this suffering linked to white supremacy, linked to male supremacy, linked to imperial policies around the world, including Gaza and the West Bank, and linked to the commodified culture that makes it difficult for the truth to surface because it's always what sells. Everybody for sale, everything for sale, every proposition for sale, and yet truth is the one thing that's always beyond that which can be bought and sold. And so I'm blessed to be here, and I'm going to be here every minute. I'm going to learn. I'm going to listen. I'm going to be inspired, and let this not be simply the first time, my dear sister Rashida. Anytime you need a fundraiser or any other gathering, let me know. And that's true for you too, Sister Yana, right here in Cambridge. Any support I can be, let me know, because you two are light and of hope in such a despairing time, but we never allow despair to have the last word.
That's right.
That's right. Thank you so much. You
Thank
always,
you, Doctor.
yeah, Dr. Hill, Dr. Oest, you've been wonderful. Thank you so much. My staff is like, keep moving. I want everybody to know Dr. Mark Lamont Hill shocked me. I did not know he speaks Arabic until I met him. I don't know why I didn't know that. So I wasn't talking smack about anybody at the table, but I'm like, oh my God, Mark knew what I was saying. But I do want to thank him so much for being here, and he does some incredible work, but I do want to, we'd be remiss to say the work you've been doing with just getting, I think Blacks for Palestine kind of movement around, really, one of the African-American pastors said to me that we're not a country that's divided or a world that's divided, but we're disconnected. And I love that you're able to connect some of that struggle with the struggle of our Black neighbors here in our country for, generations now. So I just want to thank you so much for being here. And so with that, Dr. Hill.
Thank you so much, Rashida. And it's an honor to be here at the virtual thing, you and of course Ayana and everyone, but particularly, and so close to people who are so proximate to power, but remain principled. People who don't sell out, people who don't take the easy way out, people who make the tough votes, people who speak uncomfortable truths. You all do that every single day. And so I'm honored to be here with you. I'm honored to stand in solidarity with you all. And I'm honored to be here tonight because the conversations that we're having are of the utmost urgency and the utmost importance. Rashida and I, again, we connected initially partly on this question of Palestine. And of course, yesterday was the 72nd anniversary of the Nakba. But one of the things that connects Black Americans and this question of Palestine is the question of the prison. And that's what I want to talk about tonight, this question of the prison, particularly in the United States. We live in a country that has a politics of disposability. The most vulnerable people in our nation are the ones who are most disposable by the state. Over the last 5 decades, we have gotten even further and further invested in the privatization of the public good. Everything that is of the public interest has become privatized more and more. And the market keeps its natural kind of tendency to make money and to be efficient. But efficiency ain't got nothing to do with poor people. Efficiency doesn't have anything to do with those who need medical treatment. The efficiency does pre-existing conditions that many of us are wrestling with. And so what we've seen over the last few decades is people who are struggling with mental illness put to the street. Then they go from the street to the prison because we've criminalized being on the street. We've taken people who have an addiction to drugs, and we are essentially, and we intensified our war on drug users. And so we have mass incarceration of the vulnerable. We've criminalized poverty. We've criminalized homelessness. We've criminalized addiction. We've criminalized mental illness, either directly or indirectly. And so when we enter this moment of COVID, and the media and many citizens want to make this a moment of universality. They want to make this a moment of we're all in this together. This part of me is like, well, yeah, of course. If we all in a crowded subway and somebody sneezes, epidemiologically, we may be all fighting the same chances, maybe. But there's a deeper structural issue that plays out that says that while we are all in this together in the sense that we're all vulnerable, there's another way that the people who were already vulnerable before COVID-19 hits the scene are now increasingly vulnerable. It's easy for the Surgeon General to stand up and tell us to talk to our abuelas or our big mamas or our cities or whatever about how we can do better for ourselves and only talk about personal responsibility and talk about our responsibility in pre-existing conditions. Yeah, there's room for responsibility talk. There's always room for individual responsibility talk, but there's government responsibility, there's social responsibility, there's structural responsibility. The biggest pre-existing condition that we need to be wrestling with right now doesn't belong to my big mama. The pre-existing condition we need to be talking about is racism. It's white supremacy. It's wealth inequality. Those are the pre-existing conditions that create such an environment that those who are already vulnerable become more vulnerable. And a whole bunch of folk are going to talk about that tonight. But who's more vulnerable than those who are in cages all around this country? I have friends and family who are incarcerated in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in Ohio, and they don't have the luxury of social distancing. How do you social distance in a small cage? The best possible circumstance is that they put you 23-1. You're essentially isolated or put in segregated housing, which we've determined is a form of torture. So now I got to choose between torture or being susceptible to a pandemic, which could likely kill me. Structurally, we're rendering people vulnerable. We have people in prisons in New York, and just to give a little bit of context, I know we ain't got a lot of time. When you look at the infection rates, New York City jails, the infection rate right now is about 10%. 10%. That number dwarfs any city, any state, even the epicenter of the pandemic. At the worst moments, there is nothing like a New York City jail or New York City prison. If you get corona in Pennsylvania, your chance right now, they're looking about 10%. These are astronomical numbers that we would never accept anywhere else. In fact, I'd love to see some of the energy for people who are fighting for their constitutional right to get tattoos and their haircut. I'd like some of those people to actually be fighting to liberate some of these folk who are the most vulnerable inside of these prisons. The bitter irony is prisons, as they become more and more privatized, more and more corporatized, people inside of these cages are often laboring for pennies on the dollar, pennies an hour, in the interest of the wealthy. COVID just magnifies that. I mean, what worse irony is there that there are people inside of prisons who are making masks and sanitizer, but can't have access to a mask or sanitizer? What better example of how awful it is inside of these prisons is it that people, even if they can get to health services, they got to make a copay. And yeah, their copay might be $4 or $5, but if you're only making $4 or $5 a day, imagine having to make a day's pay to make your doctor copay. This is what we're talking about inside of prisons. We've had a conversation about abolition, many of us, for many, many years. The great Angela Y. Davis talks about it. Ruth Gilmore talks about it. Critical resistance talks about it. But just like the government, we find socialism for the wealthy when it's necessary. We find abolition for the wealthy when it's necessary. We're letting folk out of jail. The question is who? Well, suddenly people are too sick to be in jail. People are too vulnerable to be in jail. That vulnerability doesn't change whether I did a favor for a billionaire or a president, or whether or not I stole a $5 loaf of bread. We have to find ways right now to fix the problem. And I'm gonna wrap this up because people always say academics got to talk about problems without solutions. So I'm gonna say a couple quick points. Our actual solution: we can start to decarcerate. We can find people who are at an age where they're considerably, according to the data, unlikely to reoffend. They can leave right now. Those who are there for small and petty crimes can be out right now. Those who are in jails because they can't afford cash bail should be out right now. Nobody should be in jail because they don't have enough money not to be in jail. That is an evil system. We have to decarcerate. We also have to stop charging and arresting and charging people for these small crimes in a time of corona. Because when we do that, and we realize that, hey, we can kill this addiction to incarceration and everybody's still okay, we can realize that abolition as a long-term social project is viable. But in the short term, it will allow us to keep everyone safe, to limit the exposure to the virus, and to create a world where being incarcerated doesn't put you on death row. And that's where we are right now. So Rashida, again, thank you for your courage. Thank you for your voice. Thanks for giving me a platform. Thank you for your solidarity. My love to everybody on this virtual dais. I'm excited to take questions and talk to folks. But again, let's keep fighting. Let's keep pushing. Let's keep organizing. We will be as good as what we organize for.
Absolutely. Dr. Hill, I've got to tell you, I've been getting so many comments now from people just listening in, just feeling, there is a healing when you hear people speaking such deep truth, and just to how the cycle, and again, so many of us have experienced and have loved ones incarcerated right now, and to hear you speak right now and speak up for so many of them is really important. I mean, I have mothers in tears calling us to please help their son get out, or their daughter. It is very painful. With Phil Agnew, thank you so much for being here. I want you to know I really have respected the incredible work of Dream Defenders and just been following you and the work that you've been doing. I really do appreciate it. With that, I want to get you going, and then so we can get through, because I really do want to get some questions and hear from folks.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I want to show love to Rasha, my comrade here in Florida. Thank you for inviting me. I'm honored to follow the people who came before me on this call and in life. So thank you all. I wrote down my comments so I could be on time for you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about police brutality. By now, we've seen the images and videos of masked and unmasked police officers harassing, beating, assaulting, detaining, and arresting Black people in the name of social distance enforcement. These scenes, though always jarring, are not new. We may be able to capture them more clearly, report them more quickly, or share them more widely, but as we've heard stated before, COVID-19 is only further enabled, not just increased, consistent police brutality in our community. If one were to look up the definition of the word brutal, one would find the following interpretation: direct and lacking any attempt to disguise unpleasantness. With that in mind, let me offer that when it comes to our people, when it comes to Black people in the United States, one should cease from using the term police brutality, because for us, all policing is and always has been brutal. The police stop us brutally. They question us brutally. They answer us brutally. They handle us brutally. They help us brutally. They detain us brutally. The history of what we now call policing has its roots in the monitoring, regulation, and restriction of the movements of Black people once called slaves. Once freed, police forces continued with their purpose, arresting thousands of mostly Black men for standing in groups, for being homeless, for having a home, for being jobless, for having a job. Those Black people lucky enough to avoid the jail cells still lived at the mercy of the almighty lynch mob or the cowards of the Klan. Today is no different. According to the nation's Ellie Mistel, Black people are 20% more likely to be pulled over while driving. Black people are more likely to be prosecuted for drug possession or use. Black people are more likely to be stopped or for walking down the street. Today, in the context of COVID-19, it's most fitting to state here tonight that while Corona is the virus, that the crisis is a racist, misogynist, money-hungry, hateful economic theory called capitalism. And with it comes the long, brutal arm of the law. Now, juxtaposed with the many videos of police terrorizing Black mothers and girls, beating Black citizen reporters, and threatening all manner of hurt and pain to little Black kids, we see images of crazed, Trump-drunk protesters being coddled by the police. We see officers restrained by fellow officers as AstroTurf protesters demand haircuts and immediate apologies for perceived slight while shouting on police officers' front lawn. Here, COVID unmasked the sickness of it. Here, the virus attacks the notion that the police exist to protect and serve anything but property and whiteness. Here, the pandemic narrates the essential nature of police today and yesterday, to respond to Blackness with the badge, the baton, and the bullet. As states hurry to open in the name of economy, there lurks yet another danger from our bittersweet history: the deputized white citizen, the roaming vigilante emboldened by whiteness and encouraged by Trump. the armed mob misinformed by Fox News, the do-gooder damsel in distress, the police department reject, the off-duty officer, the Second Amendment gun toter that stands ready and willing to police all the Black people that the police might miss, to brutalize all the Black people that the police ain't got to yet, to even kill if necessary, and we know that killing is always necessary. Still, in the face of this, Black people stay surviving, stay building, stay organizing. We remain encouraged by our Michigan brothers and sisters who fight against the brutality of poison water and corporate plunder. We are guided by the teachings of James and Grace Lee Boggs and by the radical organizing of the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. We still dance to the sounds of Motown, and we bop to the sounds of Joy Road. We are using this moment to once again fight for abolition of the police as we know it, and we know it as agents of evil, not justice. It is said that when America catches a cold, that Black Americans catch the flu. Well, America is catching a virus and Black America is catching hell, which is to say that we've been in crisis since our young lungs first stung with American air, or that we are always a 911 call away from a crisis, or a broken tail light away from a crisis, or an arrest away from a crisis, or a hurricane, a slip and fall away from a crisis, which is to say that today millions of Americans are now feeling the isolation, the worry, the nervousness, the anxiety, the pain, the lack of control over our tomorrows that we Black Americans have felt for generations, which is to say that Black people know what must be done today and the next day and the next. While we are feeding, while we are testing, while we are protecting and clothing our people, we are preparing for the next battle with our congresswomen. Because no matter what we think, the next battle is always here. The police are not inevitable. We are inevitable. While their empire is crumbling, Black people continue to build. The old ways are dying and new ways are being born. And even in the midst of crisis, even in the midst of rampant police brutality, it's important to say that we are not dead, that our caskets remain vacant, that our deathbeds still long for our arrival, and rumors of Black demise remain greatly exaggerated. Thank you, Rasha. Thank you to Congresswoman Tlaib. Thank you to Congresswoman Presley for all your work. It's an honor to be here. Thank you all for listening.
That was powerful. Woo! I just want to take a moment. That was amazing, Phil. Next is my favorite professor, Detroit's professor, Professor Bernadette. And before I even became a congresswoman, this is the professor that was speaking truth about people getting overtaxed and foreclosed on in Detroit unfairly, unconstitutionally. Still right now on the ground feeling, people are so, I don't know if you know, Professor, but so much of what you've been able to do is bring the attention, even though it was so hard to get it before our city council, to get people to understand the extent of it. But I was this young, this attorney at the nonprofit organization. She couldn't get the data, so we filed the Freedom of Information Act, got the data. So got the information, Ayanna, and then proved what we already kind of knew. But boy, having our Detroiters getting overtaxed by $600 million. And I want you all to know how connected it was with water. And I know she'll talk about this, but we fought so hard in the HEROES Act. We got $1.5 billion for water as a human right. But I want the connection of what happened to people is that their water bills, real small amounts, got on their property taxes, and with 18% interest rate, all this stuff. To see my neighborhoods, communities, where I grew up, just completely crumble because people were literally their homes were taken away for less than $500. And so I have so much respect for you. I know she won, and I just want people, she won the 2020 John Hope Franklin Award from Law and Society for her work on Predatory Cities article. I am so proud of you for that. You will always be our professor and our fighter here. So thank you so much for being here.
Rashida, thank you so much for this invitation. Yeah, I have to start by just saying how much I love this woman, Rashida. She is the people's champ. She's a fighter. She is an unapologetic soldier for justice. She is powerful, and she is my sister. And I'm so blessed to be walking alongside her in this fight to bring justice home to Detroit. I'm gonna spend these little 5 minutes I got here to sound the alarm. So we all need to really realize that COVID-19 is brutalizing local economies. So, and this is going to incentivize many local governments to rely upon predatory policies to close the budget gap. And property tax is the largest source of revenue for most localities. So we have got to keep an eye out for property tax abuse that preys on vulnerable homeowners, read Black and brown homeowners. This is exactly what we're seeing in Detroit. In Detroit, we have a situation where 1 in 4 properties has been subject to property tax foreclosure. 1 in 4. We haven't seen this number of property tax foreclosures in American history since the Great Depression. So I did research to figure out what in the world is going on here in Detroit. And my research showed that between 2009 and 2015, in each of those 7 years, anywhere between 55 and 85% of properties were being assessed in violation of the Michigan State Constitution, which clearly says no property should be assessed at more than 50% of its market value. Then we broke the data up to really figure out who is being overassessed, and we found that the lowest valued homes, 90% or more of those were being illegally assessed, where the highest valued homes, most of them were being underassessed, all right? So then the next study we did had to do with, if you doing race and work in Detroit and don't deal with race directly, you're doing everyone a disservice. And so we looked in Wayne County, and we found that in Wayne County, the predominantly African-American cities were being subjected to these unconstitutional tax assessments and these record rates of foreclosures at far greater rates than the predominantly white cities. Then the next study we did is to really figure out what we were able to say is lots of things cause tax foreclosure. So we wanted to really isolate the effect of this one variable, unconstitutional tax assessments on foreclosure rates. And we're able to say that 10% of all of these historic record rates of tax foreclosures would not have happened but for this illegality. And that's for, if you just look at the lowest valued homes, we can say 1 in 4 of those would not have gone into tax foreclosure but for this straight up illegality. And so this is not a problem of the plan. These overassessments are still happening right as we speak. Christopher Berry at the University of Chicago last month released a study that shows that even Detroit tried to fix the problem in 2017, but even after the reassessment happens, it turns out that the lowest valued homes, the problem of overassessments got worse for them. And to top all of this off, 40% of Detroiters live below the poverty line, and hence they qualify for a poverty tax exemption, which means they shouldn't be paying these property taxes in the first place. But the city of Detroit made it so difficult to access this entitlement that what we have in Detroit is a situation where 80% Black cities, so we're talking about Black folks, are being overassessed at rates we haven't seen since the Great Depression. And then they're being foreclosed upon at record rates for property taxes they weren't supposed to be paying in the first place because they qualify for the poverty tax exemption. My God, my God. This is not just happening in Detroit, it's also happening in other cities. There is a Pulitzer Prize nominated series called The Tax Divide in the Chicago Tribune. If you haven't read it, you need to read it. That shows this very same thing is happening in Chicago. On the south and west sides of the city, Black and brown people are being overtaxed. And again, my colleague at the University of Chicago, Christopher Berry, is about to, in the next few months, release a national study that shows these patterns of racialized overtaxation are happening nationally. So as COVID-19, again, as it is brutalizing these local economies, we have to be vigilant for this property tax abuse that we can expect to see nationally. And we shouldn't just keep our eye out for property tax predation. We'll also likely see an increase in predatory mortgage loans that we saw at a height, that came to the height at the Great Recession, but people think that that went away. No, it's still happening now. These predatory loans by private or by banks, et cetera, that's also happening. So what we need to, as COVID-19 again brutalizes these local economies, we have to keep our eye out for these types of predatory policies, because what they're doing is they're contributing to the dispossession of Black and brown people. And it's contributing to the widening of the racial wealth gap. And at the moment, we all know that there's moratoriums in effect all over the nation. Here in Detroit, there's moratoriums on evictions for rent, mortgage, property tax. But once these moratoriums are lifted, what we're going to see is what I call the COVID-19 dispossession will begin. And we cannot allow this. We have got to stay vigilant and really guard against, again, these predatory policies that are going to get worse as these local governments struggle. So let me, I could keep going, Rashida, you know me. So let me go ahead and stop here and be respectful of time. And
I know, I'm like, keep going. But I want you all to know the struggle is real because our mayor, this is the first, I think we've had a first white mayor, since I don't know when, but this all was going on for a while. But one of the things that I was frustrating is as we were talking about the truths that this was illegal, they said, well, you should have filed for an appeal. Yes. But all the notices that went out, whether you can appeal was after the deadline for appeals. That's all the FOIA came back, and that's what we found out. I mean, the injustice was just like right there in our faces, and you still have people with this lack of urgency to fix it, this lack of, they're still having us wait or having us go and raise money to go to court on this. I mean, this is unbelievable. I really appreciate so much your work, Professor. It really means a lot. Next is my other crew. I got to tell you, Phil, when you went and started doing a little bit of that kind of, I don't know, just speaking about Detroit and Joyride, all that, you could see Davida and myself and Lauren, we're all smiling because it just spoke to us so much. But Lauren Hood is an incredible advocate. I think I'm going in order. I don't even know if I am or not, but I'm going to call you anyways, Lauren. And they can go yell at me next time. But she is doing this incredible program called Just Care Program, talking about bias training for healthcare workers. I want to talk about that. I know Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley had mentioned about that, but I want to, and I can see you kind of nodding as you were talking, but I love that you're on there on the ground, not afraid to in your way, not me like yelling but in your way, I love, but it's okay. Cause I think that kind of shaking the table, I think as Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm always said, if you don't have a seat at the table, you bring a chair, bring your own chair. I'm one of those like, no, you need to shake the table, knock them off. There's Shirley, there's Ayanna's got Shirley. I'm like all about like, no, shake the table, knock them off the table, take the chair. I'm tired of like, no, we got to take some of those chairs back. So I thank you so much, Lauren, for all your work on the ground and would love to hear from you.
Hello. First of all, thank you so much, Rashida, for inviting me. It is truly a pleasure to be in a group of people that I don't have to convince of anything. I feel like the groups of people I usually work with, half of the work is convincing them of things that this group already knows. And secondly, I've been calling myself a revolutionary in training, and I feel like this little talk right here has been kind of a master class, if you will. I got to get my speaking skills tuned up. And I am known to sort of at least slam my hand on the table, not yet turn it over. So what I will say right now, I have a few different ideas before I talk about this Just Care program, just something I want people to think about. So I feel like I work in the space where I'm trying to get people to think a certain way. It manifests in a lot of different roles, but some of the things that I want Black folks to think about right now is, can we organize across class? I feel like I occupy this space. I have like nonprofit training, but revolutionary sensibilities. So I have touch points in all these different groups. And the grassroots is always saying, oh, the elites are just too uppity. They don't really know what the problems are. They're too far gone. And then the elites are saying, oh, the grassroots, they're so angry and they're so upset and we can't work with them. I feel like if we ever really want a collective comeuppance, we first have to know how to organize amongst ourselves. And I feel like I've always felt like a bridge. So I'm happy to be a liaison between groups as we get that kind of work going. I also want to talk about some cultural responsibility around pre-existing conditions. I feel like a lot of the healthcare concerns we have. Like I look at what people eat, like I look at what Black folks eat, like a lot of that stuff contributes to why we have diabetes and high blood pressure. And it's not like a blame the victim situation, it's empowering. I'm giving us the power to do something. Like, yes, institutions need to change, but there are also things that we can do that'll improve our chances to beat viruses like this. And we have to be honest about what we think about comfort food and how we shame people in the community when they try to go vegetarian or vegan. And how we shame people around mental health. Can we open up and talk more about our mental health issues? I have a lot of Black folks close to me that could use a therapist, but I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, oh, Black people don't go to therapy. We're resilient. And can we stop saying resilient? I think resilient is dangerous for us in these times. If everybody believes that Black folks are good at overcoming things, like when you go to seek care, why should they feel like they need to help you? Like, you're resilient, you'll be fine. We need to just change the narrative around that. And advocate for ourselves. I had a pretty serious healthcare diagnosis last year. And I was talking to like my white nurse navigator, and I was like, is there a Black surgeon that can work on me? Is there a Black radiologist that I can have? I got an all Black team, but I had to ask for it. It felt awkward in that moment, but my life was more important than my awkwardness. So now to the nonprofit program, Just Care. New Detroit Inc. is a 50-year-old racial justice organization. And our strength has always been our C-suite board. Like, we have CEOs, a lot of different organizations, the power companies, and we've always been able to, behind the scenes, kind of leverage that leadership to make institutional change. Most people who are under the age of 60, though, don't know what New Detroit is. We were started as a response to the uprisings in '67. And we kind of came out full force then. Everybody knew who we were and what we were doing. But over the past few years, we've kind of, you know, gotten a little silent. Like I said, we were doing that behind the scenes work. And it only makes sense that as a result of another uprising, if you will, we're going to be coming out full force with another program. And understanding that there are a lot of factors that contribute to the disparities in Black deaths and infection rates. The area that we specifically focus on is bias, because we've been doing that kind of work for 50 years. It's kind of like solely in our wheelhouse. And we have a couple of board members that are representatives of local health systems, and we already had those partnerships. So it's really easy for us to say, hey, we want to pilot this bias training with your residents and interns. We had a conversation with the state's chief medical officer, Dr. Khaldun, and she was like, okay, if you really want to get people in the healthcare system, you can't get those old fogey doctors that have been there 20, 30 years. You should go for residents and interns. They're still malleable. They're still thinking about their approach to their practice. So you can like get in there and really like transform them. So we're going to start off doing residents at Henry Ford Health Systems in partnership with the City of Detroit Civil Rights and Inclusion Office. It was actually them who reached out to us for a partnership. So we're going to be launching that program mid-June. And hopefully it's something that will be able to scale. Like I said, we're going to start with a small group, 100. Knowing what I know about facilitating these kind of transformative conversations, you need to have small groups. So we're going to do groups of 20 or less, interns, Henry Ford Health System, some within the city of Detroit and some within the suburbs. And we really want to be looking for long-term change. We don't just want to talk to these people right after and be like, are you still racist? We got to have like some kind of relationship with these folks that extends beyond this training that we're doing. So briefly, that's that program.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I love that. Yeah, you should have seen the face of the guy at the U.S. Census Bureau director. I was like, do I look white to you? He didn't know how to answer that. I was just trying to make it sense, because they took MENA off the census, even though it was approved. It was ridiculous. I wanted to next recognize our next speaker, Arthur Bowman. Thank you so much for being here. Love to hear the work. I know Denzel keeps me up to date, but I want to hear about what you all doing on the ground. And I know we are really working hard to make sure that BYP 100 is got the resources and the capacity. So they are one of the organizations we're raising money for tonight. So I appreciate you being on here.
Thank you for having me. On behalf of the chapter, I definitely want to thank the Congresswoman and all of you guys on her team for giving us this platform and for making this possible. and for giving us the ability to talk about the coronavirus Holocaust of Black Detroit, because I think that language is a very important thing. And it's important to use the term Holocaust when referring to it, because that's what it is when people are dying in and put in body bags and break rooms for entirely systemic reasons. I guess the gist of what I've come here to say this evening is two things. I want to talk a little bit about some of the policy decisions that the Detroit chapter of BYP 100 and just Detroit activists specifically have been fighting on the ground in Detroit in the last 20 years that have all sort of combined to lead to this crisis. And then I also want to talk about our mutual aid efforts and plug those efforts. So, I mean, in terms of policy proposals, I'm 30 years old. I don't remember 2 million people Detroit. I remember Devil's Night Detroit. I remember, the 90s when there was no one, downtown was just a bunch of office buildings and there was nowhere, you didn't go downtown on the weekend. There was no one there. There was nothing to do. And, the city's sort of narrative in the past 30 years to go from that to this sort of, revitalization, this new Detroit that they keep referencing, not to be confused with Lawrence New Detroit Inc. But the city's sort of narrative about that, has been one thing, but what young Black Detroiters like myself have seen is basically the city being incredibly slow to do anything to really meaningfully help Black Detroit specifically, but on the other hand, being extremely fast to implement anti-Black policies that negatively affect us, anti-Black policies that have contributed to this coronavirus Holocaust. So let's take, for example, the Detroit medical system, the DMC itself. For the longest time in my life, DMC was public. It was, publicly funded. There were lots of community programs involved with the DMC. But then, in a matter of years, the entire system was privatized. And indeed, Mike Duggan, our current mayor, and Conrad Mallett, who was just appointed to the position of deputy mayor, both of them are, essentially administrators that oversaw this, quick privatization of Detroit's medical system. And, frankly, as a Black Detroiter, the difference was very night and day for us when it was public versus when it was private. I do not feel that, under a publicly owned DMC, we would be hearing anything like the stories that we're hearing out of Sinai Grace, the stories of people, dying in break rooms and not even having their family members notified. But we can also talk even further. We can talk about things like transportation. So, for example, the Detroit Department of Transportation, in response to the COVID-19 situation, they actually went down to reduced bus service to Saturday bus service hours. And that's the complete opposite of what they should be doing. What we need in the city right now is actually expanded bus service, because essential workers are the people who ride those buses. And, we need more buses on the ground so that essential workers are able to, practice social distancing when they're taking the bus to work. But instead, we see the city of Detroit using this opportunity to further divest from the Department of Transportation, further divest from public services that actually benefit Black Detroiters, and using the COVID-19 situation, the COVID-19 crisis, to do so. And meanwhile, what are they investing in? Well, my organization, BYP 100 Detroit, in partnership with a lot of other groups, we're part of a coalition called Greenlight Black Futures. Greenlight Black Futures is a coalition that is designed to dismantle Project Greenlight and build true safety in the Black community in Detroit. So Project Greenlight, per actually a Freedom of Information request that we just filed with our partners in the Detroit Justice Center, Project Greenlight is a anti-Black mass surveillance program that the city has now, to our knowledge, poured. Let me check the exact figures. Poured between $21.2 to $22.4 million of public funds into since its inception in the last few years. And this is a mass surveillance system that uses facial recognition technology that is not even properly good at identifying Black people, to criminalize us, to track us. And they're not tracking us to enforce social distancing. They're tracking us to basically, keep rounding us up, rating us based on faulty information. So the city has lots of money and political will to do these things fast and efficiently. They simply have no money and political will when it is time to actually help Black Detroit. And, that's certainly, I talk about DMC, I talk about Project Greenlight, but these are just microcosms of the problem. That is a problem that springs from every pore, from, food to housing to policing and so on. And so, in terms of what our organization, BYP 100, is doing about it, we started, when the COVID-19 crisis began, we started a mutual aid, community mutual aid program that sort of followed the community aid program that was started by the DC chapter of our national organization, the DC Mutual Aid Network. And we did two things. We had a survey where we assessed people's needs in the community. People asked us for, grocery support, rent support, support getting over-the-counter medicine, support getting specialized medicines for their kids with disabilities. All kinds of needs needed to be assessed. And then we started, in conjunction with that, a mutual aid fund so that we could actually raise money and directly just put that money in the hands of people to address their needs. Because, as a Congresswoman has said, the main thing that people need right now is cash. But for us, this mutual aid network, it is both. It's two things. It's the inception of something that we need to address people's immediate needs in the coronavirus holocaust. But it's also an opportunity for the Black community in the city of Detroit to build power and to build a self-sufficiency and a self-determination that we as a people have literally never had. So when they talk about, for example, having online web learning be a thing for the foreseeable future, we know that, essential worker parents in Detroit, they're not trying to hear that. They're not trying to hear that their, child needs to have an online web learning for the foreseeable future, because they are going to be at work and not able to help with that. So that it's not even a feasible idea. And for us, we're thinking about how mutual aid can develop into, say, for example, I'm professionally, I'm a physicist. I teach mathematics and physics, and I do research in solid state physics. So I would totally be willing to help teach a whole bunch of Black kids in Detroit for free, and have that service be a part of a mutual aid network, so that parents can just kind of bring their kids to me. We can have socially distanced classrooms of very few students. The whole community can collaborate with math teachers, language arts teachers, social studies teachers to make that kind of thing happen. And we as a community can come together and really concentrate our power to make sure that we are empowering ourselves for the foreseeable future, because we know that there's no real going back to normal. We know, as Dr. West said, that this is an opportunity for disaster capitalism to be implemented as it has never been implemented before. So the capitalists are very clearly making their own choice. They're making the choice to steal our education from us, to steal our self-determination for us. And we see mutual aid as making the choice to empower ourselves and our communities.
Thank you so much, Arthur. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Again, you all heard a lot about what the work that they're doing. Again, if we have a link to donate to each of the organizations. BYP 100 is one of the ones listed. And the donations go directly to the organization. So again, thank you so much, Arthur. Next is Larissa Richardson, who's been also my friend for years. She's the one who keeps me calm. when I need to be. And I think she's constantly praying for me. I appreciate her so much. But Davida, she talks so highly of you. I know when I think you guys were at Grandma Rosedale together. Yeah. And the work that you've been doing. So much respect for you and really, really much needed advocacy on the ground here in Detroit. With that, Davida.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Tlaib, and thank you so much for having me on this panel, and for all my panelists. I am just honored to be here with y'all this evening. Thank you so much, Congresswoman Presley, for advocating so strongly and so fearlessly, because that has been game changing. I think that has been just amazing. So what I want to spend a couple of minutes on today is to talk about
Audio is.
So Davida, do you by any chance have any headphones on you or no? Or maybe move any cell phones away from your, yeah. Let's try that. Okay, and then unmute now and see if it works. One more time. Yep, there you go.
Is that a little bit better?
So that's the trick. I've been on these since the pandemic, and it's get the phones away from, sometimes that works, or headphones, so.
Oh, okay. Did me throwing my cell phone across the room work? Hear me a little bit better?
No, but yeah, we all wanted to. Yep, you sound so clear right now.
Okay, fantastic. Sorry about that. I'm new. Listen, I so appreciate Arthur. And he's 30 years old. God bless him. Arthur, I'm going on 52 years old. Listen, this whole Zoom situation for me and all these calls via the internet is so brand new. Y'all gonna have to help me and Ayanna let people pretend, think that we're millennials. We're not. We're in our 40s too, and I still remember getting my first Hotmail email and all that stuff, and I remember when the AOL CDs came in the mail, and I was so excited. So listen, the young people call me a Yelder, so I'll take that, and some of them call me Auntie, so I will take that. But again, so appreciate being on the call. I just wanted to spend a couple of moments this evening, because I know so many of us are either reading or rereading, and some folks are reading it for the very first time, an amazing book that's called Medical Apartheid, and it was written by a brilliant woman by the name of Harriet Washington. And I wanted to spend a few moments today to talk about food apartheid, because language matters. How we talk about the virus and this lack of access to healthy food matters. And so what we know and what we've talked about is that Black people we know are disproportionately dying from this virus. And it's impossible to separate that from decades of kind of hyper segregation, landfills, air pollution, the lack of healthy, affordable, quality healthcare, fresh food. And in Detroit, our Congresswoman will lift up quality water, right? And so I think that we have to realize that all of this is structural. And we also have to realize that it does not have to be this way, but it is. And so because of that, I don't use the word food deserts. I don't use it. Many people in the community, activists, advocates, people in the neighborhood don't use it because it didn't come from community. And so the word that we use in community is the word food apartheid. And the reason why we don't use food deserts in Detroit, particularly in Detroit, is because the word desert, right? That's a natural phenomenon. But the lack of access to healthy, fresh food in the city of Detroit, there's nothing natural about it. And it's not a phenomenon. As a matter of fact, it's not even accidental. It was deliberate. And so many Black communities lack the access to healthy, fresh, affordable food, but that comes from structural inequality. And here's the thing, deliberate policies were made. Public and private resources were taken from urban communities in Detroit and allocated to the suburbs. These are intentional.
Decisions were made in the city of Detroit that excluded the word healthy altogether. And I think one of the main reasons why we don't use the word food desert in the city of Detroit is because it's disrespectful to our elders. And so what pains me most about this coronavirus, what pains me most about the disproportionate effect it is having on Black people is that it is killing a generation of our elders. The elders who basically told us in 2007, when every national and regional grocery store abandoned the city of Detroit and all of its citizens, it was the elders who told us, baby, don't worry about that. Let the grocery stores go. We know how to grow our own food. You see, we came from Alabama to Detroit in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s in the Great Migration. We came from Mississippi. We came from Georgia. We came from Arkansas. We know how to grow our own food. The elders told us that. My God. And as a result of the work that they had laid down, the foundation that they had laid down years ago, the city of Detroit, I proudly say, is the epicenter for urban agriculture. In our city, we have over 1,600 farms and gardens. And we are moving toward a city that aims for food sovereignty. So don't call us a desert when over 600,000 tons of food grew in the city of Detroit proper last year. It's disrespectful to the work that our elders showed us how to do. And so I just wanted to just make sure that we are very clear with the language that we're using, that Detroit is not a desert. However, Detroit does suffer from food apartheid. So what I do and what the community that I surround myself with in the organization where I'm the executive director, Food Lab Detroit, do, what we do is we spend a lot of time imagining. We spend a lot of time asking these far-reaching questions about how public space, community resources, and local policies, how they might create something new to supposedly fill these empty spaces, because Detroit is 140 square miles and about a third to a quarter of the city is vacant. And so we do spend a lot of time asking ourselves, how can we fill these empty spaces? And so we have to do what's called community asset-based research, because here's what we know. We know we've got the skill set because we've got farmers who came from the South. And we have farmers who also came from Mexico as well, in a community that's called Southwest Detroit, who know how to grow food. Here's what we know about Detroit and why Detroit is a jewel. Why they want our land is because where Detroit is situated. Detroit is situated on a third of the world's freshest body of water on the planet. Detroit, Michigan sits there. So we know we have water. And we also know we have a willing group of folks who have the skill set, the knowledge, and the desire to grow our own food. And so we ask ourselves in Detroit all the time, how can we fill these empty spaces? So rather than just simply putting in an out-of-town corporate chain supermarket, which exploits profits, which as our Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley lifted up, these corporate chain grocery stores, they don't add to the community at all. They don't add to the circulation of dollars in our community at all. These tax dollars leave our city. They go to places like Ohio, where Kroger's is located, or places like down in Texas, where Whole Foods is located. Those dollars don't circulate in our community. And so we're asking ourselves about how can we ensure that we have community-based solutions to our lack of healthy and fresh food in the city of Detroit. Because here's what we know. This is why research and data is so important, is because what the research tells us is that proximity to a well-stocked grocery store is not the solution, given this country's elaborate food problem. It's not the solution. And so we have to look at, number one, how do we have community-driven solutions? And the problem with the word food deserts is that when the media mentions food deserts, it often focuses the problem while giving a nod that the answer is more chain supermarkets, and that's not what it is at all. And so I just wanted to bring some solutions and also some good word to this particular conversation about what is happening on the ground in Detroit. And that is that in our communities, where we are given the opportunity to create places and spaces and to grow our own food and developing our own skills. And while we're aiming for sovereignty and independence, we have residents who are commandeering their own community farmers market. We have urban farming that's happening. We have co-op community grocery stores that are being built right now by the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network. Food Lab works to cultivate Black-owned food businesses. And yes, Lauren, I know you talked about that we have to take personal responsibility about the comfort food that we eat. Yes, we do. But we also have solutions. And so we took something that we love called soul food, migration food, struggle food, you call it whatever you want to call it. But we have such visionaries, such innovators, such entrepreneurs in Detroit that Kirsten and Erica, two chefs in the city of Detroit, took soul food, created it a plant-based menu, and created not one, not two, but working on the third, Detroit Vegan Soul. So yes, we have the baddest vegan soul food restaurant in the city of Detroit that was created by two Black women. Thank you very much. And so these are things that are happening in our community, but it has to come from community, because I believe that the community has the answers. They just need the resources and the tools. And so when we talk about, again, we want to eradicate the word food desert. We want to absolutely talk about it from the context of apartheid. And we want to lift up the stories of Black folks who are working very hard in our neighborhood to bring fresh, healthy, affordable, culturally appropriate food, because those stories speak to the richness of our community. And the richness provides us an important guide for moving the story away from the desert, which means this narrative of lack of, and it leads us toward deeper understanding the multiple causes and possible solutions to the crisis of food access in Black communities. So thank y'all so much.
So now you know, Davida, you confirmed when I tell people all the time, my district, Detroit, births movements. We do. Always. It'll start off here and everybody goes and claims it was them, but it was really us. So I'm just so thrilled to now center all the conversation and centering around 4 organizations. I just want to remind folks, and we'll be putting links out, but you all heard from Arthur around BYP 100. We want to continue supporting their work. I also want to uplift again, Detroit Action. These folks are part of my housing justice work group. They're fighting against, high cost of rent, but now they're fighting for rent moratorium and getting access to stopping evictions. They're also been really a great partner in elevating what's going on with tax foreclosure that Professor Bernadette talked about. So we want to try to support the continued work. You all know, and you've heard me constantly say this, but it really is, when we show up for each other, we save lives. And I truly believe that. These are organizations, many of the ones already just talked about, including Davida's organization and what Lauren's been doing with Just Program with Detroit, a New Detroit. All of that is that us showing up for each other and not really just relying on somebody to come in. We're doing it ourselves, our own community. So I want to support them. The last organization is Brightmore Connections. Again, they are on the ground, and Davida, you've seen them. I know a lot of us Detroiters are very familiar. That's why I took Senator Sanders when I gave a tour to my district. I said, you got to come and see this organization that Reverend Rosalind is on the street, literally a food pantry in the community, fighting back against poverty. As someone that she's amazing woman that was literally incarcerated for I don't know how many years, was able to come out, and she is now just giving back so much with so much power. And again, she's helping with water shutoffs and getting people access to water. And then Operation Refuge, Pastor Overman has been leading and feeding folks in Western Wayne and communities like Inkster and Redford Township. And so again, want to again uplift that. We're going to be sharing a lot of these links for folks, but if you can donate whatever amount, and of course, I'm going to continue trying to support their work. So I want to again try to center all this discussion, but do it also with our money, keeping our money within our community, helping our neighbors. I want to continue to do that. Next, I want to get to some questions. I know this is always hard, but this has been a powerful conversation, y'all. And I was texting Ayana and saying, there's something healing when you hear people speaking the truth. And then there's something like you feel a ton of bricks off because you feel like there's all this happening and either people don't believe us or people are not understanding, but even hearing you all talking about it all at one moment during this conversation has been, I think for me inspiring, but also this call to action, like, okay, we're not alone. Like there's all these folks continue to speak about these issues. So I want to ask, I think Professor Bernadette, Lauren, and Arthur and Davida, right now, nationally, when residents, when people turning on the TV and they hear about news about Michigan, they're flooded with those images of the armed white protesters or call them protesters, but whatever, demanding immediate reopening of the government. What's actually happening in Detroit is not talked enough. They get more kind of coverage and people are trying to understand, well, why are they out there? What's going on? And we talked a little bit about that, but I want you all, what should folks actually know about what we're doing, about how they can really help, other than obviously supporting organizations, but what can we do to change this narrative that's so focused on them, the hate, that violence, and changing it to talk about, what's going on here, because I feel very much it is slowing this progress of the sense of urgency for us to get resources to our communities when the focus, when they talk about Michigan, is those folks in Lansing. So that's for Davida, Lauren, or Arthur, or Bernadette, Professor.
I can go first if that's fine. I think that there is, we know historically that white supremacists have an enormous amount of power to command the attention of the American media, and that is because white supremacy and white terrorism, it is the invisible army. It's one of the most powerful political forces in American history. It birthed this country, and it is largely behind the president's ascension to power. And I think that, I think it really kind of starts with media accountability, because there is a huge amount of work that is being done by Black Detroiters to, in very, very innovative ways to sustain and support our communities through this.
Arthur, and not to interrupt, but Arthur, I'm serious. Like, we've been fighting for like people can't wash their hands right now, thousands on water shut, and it's a global pandemic, and media is not covering that like they should. They're covering the small group of people that obviously, for me, the form of hate and violence and this kind of, and there's all this other work that is out there and all these issues regarding testing and Arthur, for me, it's frustrating. And we've been obviously trying to do it through my office, using the power of the letterhead, getting out there about just using the example of the water shutoffs. When I tell people that, I got folks like groups like the Detroit people, Detroit's People's Water Board, the folks, the people, all these folks are delivering water. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, they're in Highland Park delivering water door to, like, we got a list and we go and deliver water to people. Yeah. And they're like, what? And I feel that is a part, like, it's similar to what Flint experienced. They were carrying bottles of water that were brown and saying, look, we're getting poisoned. And I just feel like, what does it take? These white men show up with guns and all this stuff, but we got people dying because they don't have access to water. And it's just, I want to hear for me, I know you were talking about the media, but I feel like there are people that look like us that are in the media now, a lot more than they used to be, right? A little bit. But like, I don't, is it that we create our own media? I've always thought about that. Like, we do it ourselves. And Denzel always reminds me we can do it ourselves and create that media, do the videos, get it out. But yeah, I want to talk more about that, like of how do we change that?
I got a suggestion, Rashida. I think that people are moved by real life stories, but it kind of borderlines being a little exploitive though. Like, I think what would move people if you could see how somebody has to live when they don't have water, like reading a story about how people that don't have water in their house have to take the water they cook with. They can't wash it down the sink. They have to save it to take it to the toilet so you can flush the toilet. And multiple members of the family are filling up the tub with like 20, 30, 40 bottles of water to take a bath and using the same bath water. Like, I feel like if we had personal stories from people who are experiencing that, but it always borderlines being kind of exploitive. I think there's power in telling a story, but there's also something when you're suffering like that, that being filmed, you don't want to share. So I'm not sure.
Oh, I know. There was an elderly couple that I don't know if it was a couple years ago or something, we were talking about water shop, and it was massive. And I know it was, a lot of it was tied with the tax foreclosure tragedy that we were going through. Is they were melting the snow, Lauren. They were melting, they were putting.
We gotta show that people, we gotta see how people are struggling.
Yeah. So I want to get back. I don't know, Bernadette, Dr. West, do you want to say something?
Well, I just think that this issue of the white supremacist character of corporate media is so real, so crucial. But there's also the class character of it. We've had a history of Black media that has not told the truth about the suffering of Black poor people. It's covered the Black bourgeoisie very well in terms of their social activities and so forth and so on. But when it comes to the suffering of Black poor and working people, it has fallen short too. Now, it's done much better on issues of white supremacy than the corporate media, no doubt. But I mean, that's a low bar. But I do think that when you talk about Detroit, I mean, Detroit became the cultural capital of Black people. It became the political ground zero for revolutionary projection, precisely because you had this rich Black country folk go into an industrial order that was proletarianized and unionized, so the centrality of class could not be escaped. And what has happened is you got now these class divisions in Detroit, where it's so easy for the Black middle class to downplay, render invisible the suffering of Black poor and working people. And that's part of the challenge of where we are now in this post-Obama moment. Mm-hmm. And we cannot escape that. We have to be able to speak that in such a way that we're not demonizing the Black bourgeoisie, but we certainly have to bring our critiques and even indictments of that Black bourgeoisie when it fits so well in corporate structures, including corporate media, that can't say a mumbling word about our brothers and sisters in the hood who can't get water.
In addition to corporate structures, municipal structures.
Yeah. You know, Congresswoman Tlaib, I wanted to make a comment as well. You're absolutely right, right? And so there is all types of efforts that are going on in the city of Detroit. And of course, I always speak from the lens of food. And so, I can tell you stories about chefs all over the city of Detroit, who the story is that we hear in the mainstream media is about, of course, we cannot take our eye off the ball with all of the restaurants that have closed down, our hospitality workers, right? Our restaurant workers. But I can also tell you stories about chefs who have come together, even in the time of despair and uncertainty with their own businesses, have come together to utilize their kitchens and have turned their kitchens into commissary kitchens, right? And they are preparing meals and feeding our most vulnerable. They are feeding our frontline workers. They are feeding their staff. They are feeding hospital workers. Like I can tell you all kinds of stories, even of Black businesses, that while the businesses that are located downtown, when Arthur talks about the revitalization, and we talk about the fact that, we don't want to talk about the fact that one man owns over 100 high rises, in downtown Detroit. But you see all these businesses that are closing in downtown and midtown Detroit, and I'm talking about restaurants. Let me tell you something, in the hood, where we always had carry out, where we always had delivery, let me tell you something. The rib joint is still popping on Friday and Saturday night. We are practicing social distancing, but the line is still down the street, okay? Let me tell you something else that's happening too in the city of Detroit. The informal economy, Congresswoman Tlaib, I'm not gonna give you no names, okay, because I'm not snitching, but the informal economy in Detroit is alive and well, okay? Tomorrow's dinner will come complimentary of some church mothers who's gonna be frying chicken, making me some macaroni and cheese, a potato salad, and collard greens, and it's not gonna be coming from a restaurant. So we got people that are home cooking right now, okay? And so there is currency that is being exchanged right now in the city of Detroit. We can't tell the media that, but in the informal economy is live and well. My father just got his tire changed and it wasn't at, a Bell Tire. So, but anyway, we're not gonna talk about, I'm just saying.
And Davida, even look, I grew up in Southwest Detroit, so and it's in Southwest, the same thing. There's, how there's underground music scene. There is an underground food scene where we know which mothers. I could take. There's one particular woman. Oh my God! But it's amazing.
So that's happening, and I wanted to close because I really want to hear from other folks, but I do want to close by saying this is that I do want us not to take our eye off the ball of what's really happening, right? And so when we see the white militia storming our Capitol, I don't want to take our eye off the ball of what is really happening and the narrative that is being perpetuated, Congresswoman Tlaib. And that's this narrative where they're using the use of joblessness and its effect for an argument to reopen the economy, right? And I think that really demands for us to have a real critical critique and for us to understand what's really happening here. We've got to understand that this media is complicit in capitalism. And so what I mean by that is that if the shutdown, right, has produced joblessness and joblessness is causing misery, then the logic is we got to end the shutdown. That's what everybody's talking about. But it's not that simple. And when we start to think simple, we often start to think stupid. And I think that that's stupid thinking because the argument is premised on the idea that the economic misery people are suffering right now is unavoidable. And I think that that is a lie. And so people might want you to think that the government has caused all of your troubles by imposing this economic shutdown, but it's not true. The government has caused your trouble by imposing an economic shutdown without introducing the kind of policies that will make a shutdown possible. And what I mean by that is this, can we think for a minute, if our healthcare was not tied to our job, could that make it tolerable? Could we think for a minute if we had universal basic income? Would that make the shutdown tolerable? Could we think for a minute what we're really saying, but we can't. We can't think like that because there are people, Rashida, that right now who you are, who's in Congress, your colleagues right now, who we can't think about how can we mitigate this economic crisis because we can. Hell, the United States of America prints money. We can mitigate the consequences of this crisis if we wanted to. But if mitigating those crises means that we have to ask questions and demand more handout, when we know folks in Congress hate to use the word handout, if that means that we have to nationalize our health insurance system, if that means that we have to eat into corporate profits, we can't even have those conversations because that's a direct attack on capitalism. And so now they're continuing to perpetuate this narrative by tying joblessness to these angry militia groups, to the fact that these are people that are suffering. Instead of asking us to imagine, can we possibly have a shutdown, listen to science, listen to the health experts, and have a shutdown where we all are safe, but we are able to do it in a way in which we are all not suffering. And I say that we can, but that's not the conversation that we're having in the media. So I just wanted to lift that up, that this is deliberate. And I think it's a narrative that's being perpetuated by the right on purpose.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, when you say handout, it's so interesting because they never call a handout when they bail out the corporations ever. I know, Phil, you have to go. If there are any last thoughts before we go, and I want to really hear from Arthur and Professor Burnett. I think you're muted, darling. You might still be muted. Are you muted?
Yes, I was muted. I got my phone in the thing. No, I was just telling Rasha, I'm appreciative of being here. I may be on the panel, but I'm learning. I'm sitting here getting schooled by Dr. Davida Davison over here, and it was an honor to be here. You know, the work that you all are doing in Detroit shines a light to the work that people are doing around the country. And I think in order for us we're going to need to fight the state and continue to build the alternative to the state. And so my school, the doctrine I come from, talks about dual power. And so as you all in the squad are doing what you can inside, we've got to be able to build strong social movements that know how to govern, that know what democracy is like, that know how to run things, that know how to build infrastructure and organization, that knows how to feed people, clothe people, train people, teach people. And that's how we're actually going to be able to win, because we've got to earn the trust and respect of our people. And so to hear the stories that have been exchanged has been a great honor. I'm going to shut up and listen and can keep listening in, but I got some housekeeping things to do. So I love you all. Thank you all for letting me be a part of this.
No, thank you so much, Phil, for being with us. Dr. Hill, I wanted to go to you real quick and see if you had any final thoughts. I see Dr. West, do you want something to say? I saw every time his green button comes up, I'm like, oh, it's Dr. West wants to say something.
Oh, no, I'm learning, and I'm going to stay till the end, but I've said my last word, and thank you so much. And just let me know how I can be of service to you and the movement there in the blessed city of Detroit. Detroit is special.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for always, I think, you know, when I can be able to pick up the phone and call you and you affirm that I'm not the one that's wrong, that they are, it makes me want to work. It just makes me walk out the door, say, okay, I got this. Don't let them try to gaslight me. So I appreciate you, Dr. West. Dr. Hill, I wanted to have you have any closing remarks, anything like that?
No, I like Phil said, you know, it's been an honor to just listen and learn and to really hear from people on the ground who are doing the work in Detroit in particular. It's been so powerful. We got work to do, and you know, November is one major step and one major stop on the way. But the whole story of our journey and our struggle isn't an election. We need to win this election, but we need to do a whole lot more. And so the organizing work, the building work that we do, is so significant. So I encourage everybody to just donate to these organizations, to support these organizations, and also to support, Rashida, because again, it's a generational, it's a once in a generation opportunity to have progressive, honest, radical, fearless voices in politics, and we have one here. And so we need to support in every way possible. So I'm here for you. I'm here for everybody who's looking for justice, and I'll be here to the end. But just needed to say that.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. Thank you so much. Professor Bernadette, is there?
I just want to say some closing words about the power of narrative. So, you know, when you're talking about these protesters with the guns, the Black community is paying a double price with COVID-19, right? We're amongst the highest death and infection rates, but also our financial survival is on the line, because we often hold the types of jobs that can't go online. Yet the narrative of these gun-toting protesters is that they are during this shutdown, they are the ones sacrificing for us. They are the ones doing this sacrificing. When in fact, the Black community is again a double death, a mortal death, and we're suffering a financial death. But the point is that this double death is invisible to white supremacists, right? Like these gun-toting protesters. Our pain, our suffering is invisible. So they're the ones that think that they are carrying the burden of the shutdown, when in fact we are carrying the double burden. And so I think our job, in what we're learning from, what we can learn from past, fights against racial discrimination in terms of like how that brings us to COVID-19, is about rescuing these narratives, taking back these narratives, right? Because even with, again, from whatever you deal with, it's about with the property tax foreclosure, why is that happening? Well, it's because the narrative is, oh, you didn't pay your taxes on time. When in fact, we need to shift these narratives from narratives of failure of personal responsibility, and we need to spotlight the structural injustice. It's not that we're not paying our taxes on time, it's that there's these systematic unconstitutional tax assessments. With the subprime lending, the narrative was, oh, we're buying houses we can't afford. No, that's not the truth. We need to spotlight the structural injustice, which is you are giving subprime loans to African Americans who qualify for standard loans. With the whole redlining, oh, they don't take care of their communities, they live in slums. No, you are redlining our communities, and we don't have access to investments. And so I think our central job, whether it's COVID or the racially disparate impacts of COVID or any other instance of racially discriminatory policy, our job is to rescue the narrative and to transfer, because what they will always try and do is bring a narrative of a failure of personal responsibility. And we have to say, no, it's not about failures of personal responsibility. There are these structural injustices that we need to highlight and that we need to do. And so that is our move that we need to be consistent about, is again, rescuing the narratives and spotlighting structural injustice and undermining these dominant narratives of failure of personal responsibility. That's the work we have to do.
That's powerful. Thank you so much. I saw a lot of nodding the heads and everything. And Davida, a resident texted me asking me if they can have dinner with you. I don't think it's romantic. I think they just really appreciate everything that you were saying. Arthur, we want to end with you. You know, as you kind of close us off a little bit, I want to close us. I want you to talk about like why, you know, I want people, you know, I know it's hard because I hate asking for money, but why should people donate to BYP 100?
Well, yeah, I mean, I want to piggyback on what a lot of folks said, specifically Doctors Davison and West. You know, I think when we return to this question of the protesters, it absolutely, you know, the undue focus on them is absolutely an empowerment of capitalism. I would actually go even a little bit further than that and say that what it is organized fascism. What it is the degeneration of capitalism. And that is really what we are seeing in real time. How do I know that this is true? Because the German press in the 1930s called the people who were throwing stones through Jewish shop windows protesters too. This is history literally repeating itself, moderates unwittingly empowering fascists as they do. And we know from history that the only way to fight this beast of fascism is honestly, you know, elections help, but it's really solidarity. It's really building power, you know, in our communities and becoming as self-reliant, as self-determined as possible. The media will pay us the attention that we deserve when we have communities that are so strong that the fact that, you know, Amazon not Amazon, but, you know, Microsoft and Google are over here trying to steal our kids' educations via this online web learning scam, that's not even going to be something that affects our community because we already have mutual aid networks of teachers that offer these services, you know, for free or low cost. You know, it's the same thing with our, you know, the medicine and the resources that we have in the hood, the food and the groceries and the rent money. You know, what we really need to form is a network of people that are circulating all of this power and all of this resources amongst ourselves to the point where the government's fascistic degeneration doesn't even really affect us. So I feel like that's why, you know, you should be donating to mutual aid efforts, both of BYP 100 and of any, you know, organization that you know of that's doing it, because, you know, we have a question to answer for ourselves here. Will our future be one of solidarity and mutual cooperation and aid, or will it be one of barbed wire? Will it be one of, you know, armed protesters being able to sort of, storm the Capitol whenever they feel like it. When we build these networks of power, we become unignorable, unspinnable, unbuyable, and unbeatable. So that's why you should do it.
No, thank you all so much. This was amazing. I know it's a long night. I want to, as you know, I'm one of the first Muslim women ever elected in Congress, and it's the month of Ramadan. And the last 10 days of Ramadan that we're in, there's a night of power. And usually, you're in there with your imam and we're praying, and it's also the point where you do self-reflection, but you also give back to your community. But I know for me, this was absolutely a moment of power, and hearing all of you and reconfirming just the important work that is happening on the ground and why we need to continue to support folks. I worked at human services agencies prior to ever getting in public office. Never thought I could ever, run and win with a name like mine, all these things that you think are these issues, but you can outwork it. But one of the things that I remember is a young mom that came in, she was crying, and one of our organizations that providing early childhood education was closing down in her neighborhood, but that was the one that she could walk to. That was the one she could take. It was 2 of her children there. And, I'm consoling her, and I was like, listen, I'm going to find you a different program. And the mindset, I'm thinking a different program to get her child, early childhood, childhood education program. And she said, no, you don't understand. Yes, that's good, but that's where my kids could eat twice a day. And I just, I always think of her. I always think of these grassroots organizations, again, coming from the human service sector. I feel like policy change is critical, absolutely, but getting people through everyday issues, being there for people, showing up for them is really going to save lives, but it also make us stronger in the sense of like people feeling very much like you said, Lauren, you can't even, so many people are too, like, it's so vulnerable to be able to share some of that and not being able to like exploit it. But even as she was talking as a mom, I was thinking, my God, like, we sometimes don't realize the real struggle that is happening until people come to us for help. And these are grassroots organizations. And when I hear Reverend Ross talk about at Brightmore Connections about what comes through the door, I'm always, telling her, continue sharing those stories. You have to share the name, but continue sharing those stories, because it will save someone else's life, and people will know to come forward and gain help. Being the eldest of 14, I've been taking care of people all my life. And I was everything, the social worker, the translator, everything. And even during this pandemic, from the unemployment to everything that's going on, I can't even imagine what our families are going through. So I'm asking you all, whoever's listening, at this point, please check on 3 people. Anybody, just check on them. You'll be surprised. Not all of them are online. You know this. I mean, I don't have to tell, but especially my Detroiters this. There is a power of that community connection, and we might be able to get people what they need right now. Because no matter how much I continue to pass on the federal level, it's the implementation that is broken sometimes. I mean, I fought so hard for different things, and I'll come back and say, well, wait a minute, why isn't this community getting what they're supposed to get? And it is systematic racism. It's all those things. But I think very much the way to try to empower our communities to support grassroots organizations like this. But again, thank you all so much. Thank you to my incredible team for helping monitor all of this and blocking the haters. No, I'm just joking. They come out of the droves, Mark. You think I'm joking? Have you ever seen them? Oh my God, it's like that's what they do for a living. But I do want to leave with you all just so much love and strength from this conversation. Thank you so much. I wish you all, I hope you saw all the text messages and our messages came in. People were really, even the things you were saying, they were just like, you can feel it with the instant questions and the instant comments. Thank you all so much. I really, I almost don't want to end it, but we all got to sleep. But I just thank you so much for speaking truth to power. Thank you, Dr. West. All of us love you. You have no idea. Thank you for being here, Dr. Hill.
Love you.
Arthur, thank you. Davida, Lauren, thank you, thank you, thank you. And Phil, who left, but thank you all so much. God bless. Be safe.
So I don't have the actual way to end the meeting. It's not coming up on my end.
I'll be ending it. Thank you all so much for joining.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.